Now we'll discuss the ideal tragic hero according to Aristotle. Aristotle first lays down the general rule that characters in a tragedy should be good or, if possible, better than the good. Like the painter, the dramatist sketches his characters so that the quality of goodness shines out clearly than in life. Then he proceeds to examine the qualities which the ideal tragic hero must have. We cannot find any passage in poetics where, without any exception of the catharsis phrase, that has attracted so much critical attention as his ideal of the tragic hero. So, the first point we would like to discuss is that the hero or the ideal tragic hero, in according to Aristotle, is not just an utter villain. The According to him, the function of a tragedy is to arouse the emotions of pity and fear, and Aristotle deduces the qualities of his hero from the function. He should be good, but not too good or perfect, for the fall of a perfectly good man from happiness into misery would be odious and repellent. His fall will not arouse pity, for he is not like us, and his undeserved fall would only shock and disgust. Similarly, the spectacle of an utterly wicked person passing from happiness to misery may satisfy our moral sense, but it may be lacking in the proper tragic qualities. It excites neither pity nor fear. Thus, according to Aristotle, perfectly good as well as utterly wicked persons are not suitable to be heroes in a tragedy. However, Elizabethan tragedy has demonstrated that, given the necessary skill and art, even villains like Macbeth can serve as proper tragic heroes, and their fall can arouse the specific tragic emotions. The wreck of such power excites in us a certain tragic sympathy. We experience a sense of loss and regret over the waste or misuse of splendid splendid gifts given by God. Then there is the hero is not perfectly good or saintly. In the same way, as we have said earlier, the Aristotelian hero is not a saint, a character perfectly good. It would be unsuitable as a tragic hero. He is on the side of the moral order and not opposed to it, and therefore his fall shocks and repels. Moreover, his martyrdom is a spiritual victory, and the sense of his moral triumph drowns the feeling of pity for his physical suffering. The saint is self effacing and unselfish, and so he tends to be passive and inactive. Aristotle's conclusions are based on Greek drama with which he was familiar. And secondly, he is laying down the qualification of an ideal tragic hero. He is here discussing what is the very best and not what is good. On the whole, his views are justified, for it requires the genius of maybe Shakespeare to arouse sympathy for an utter villain. And saints as successful tragic heroes have been extremely rare. So we can say that Aristotle was talking about a person of means an intermediate sort of a person. So the Aristotle points out that the ideal tragic hero must be an intermediate kind of person, a man not preeminently virtuous and just, whose misfortune, however, is brought upon him not by vice or depravity but by some error of judgment. The ideal tragic hero is a man who stands midway between the two extremes. He is not eminently good or just, though he inclines to the side of goodness. Then is hamartia, which has various interpretations, which is sort of a tragic flaw. The tragic hero is not depraved or vicious, but he is also not perfect, and his misfortune is brought upon him by some fault of his own. The Greek word used here, that is hamartia, its root meaning or its meaning is missing the mark. He falls not because of the act of some outside agency or vice or depravity, but because of hamartia or miscalculations on his part. Hamartia is not a moral failing. Therefore, it is unfortunate that it has been translated rather loosely as tragic flaw. Aristotle himself distinguishes hamartia from moral failing and makes it quite clear that he means by it some error of judgment. He writes that the cause of the hero's fall must lie not in depravity but in some error or hamartia on his part. Humphrey House has written that Aristotle does not assert or deny anything about the connection of hamartia with moral failings in the hero. It may be accompanied by normal imperfections, but it is not itself a moral imperfection, and in the purest tragic situation, the suffering hero is not morally to blame. Now, hamartia and its sources. We have already talked about hamartia, which is a sort of error or miscalculation. But the error may arise in many ways. It may arise from ignorance of some material fact or any circumstance, or it may be an error arising from hasty or careless view of the special case, or it may be an error voluntary but not deliberate, as in the case of acts committed in anger or passion. Then is hamartia, its real meaning and significance. As a matter of fact, hamartia is a word which admits of various shades of meaning, and hence it has been differently interpreted by different critics. Hamartia is not a moral imperfection, though it may be allied with moral faults, that is to say, that it may be an error of judgment, whether arising from ignorance or of some material circumstance, or from some rashness and impulsive behavior, or even from some passionate behavior. It may even be a character trait, for the hero may have a tendency to commit errors of judgment and may commit not one but a series of errors. The conclusion here can be that Aristotle refers again and again, which may be taken to be his ideal. In this play, the play in Oedipus, the life of the hero is a chain of errors, the most fatal of all being his marriage with his mother. So, Oedipus is Aristotle's ideal hero. We can say that his conception of hamartia includes all the three meanings mentioned above, which in English cannot be covered by a single term. So, hamartia can be said to be an error or a series of errors, whether morally culpable or not, committed by an maybe a noble person, and these errors drive him to his doom. The tragic irony lies in the fact that hero may commit an error innocently, unknowingly, without any evil intention, yet he is doomed to this fault. He has hamartia, he commits error, and as a result his very virtues hurry him to his ruin. For example, Othello in the modern drama is like the same. Oedipus in the ancient are the two most conspicuous examples of ruin wrought by characters, noble but not without defects, acting in the dark, and it seemed for the best. Now is the ideal hero his eminence. Aristotle has laid down another qualification for the tragic hero, that he must be of the number of those in the enjoyment of great reputation and prosperity. In other words, we can say that he must be a person who occupies a position of lofty eminence in society. He must be a highly placed individual. He must have a good reputation. This is because Greek tragedy with which Aristotle was, I think, familiar, was written about a few distinguished royal families. Aristotle has based his qualification of the tragic hero on what he was familiar with, considers eminence as essential for the tragic hero. Now we can conclude that Aristotle's dictum is quite justified on the principle that higher the state, greater the fall, or because heavens themselves blaze forth the death of princes, while the death of a beggar passes unnoticed. But we should also remember that Aristotle nowhere says that the hero should be a king or at least royally descended. As in other matters, so in this respect too, they were the Renaissance critics who distorted Aristotle and made the disqualification more rigid and narrow. Aristotle has never or categorically said that the hero should be of some royal stature. Thank you.